It's my great pleasure now, though, to introduce our next speaker, David Carley, who is Senior Advisor with Plug-in British Columbia. It's an initiative co-chaired by the BC Government, BC Hydro, and several municipal governments to lay the groundwork for plug-in electric vehicles and related electric charging infrastructure in British Columbia, Canada. Sounds familiar. Over the past 4 years, David's been promoting the benefits of electric vehicles by hosting public outreach and education events, advising government policy and incentives, and advising on charging infrastructure and strategy. He's originally from the Kapiti Coast. Welcome home, David. Where are you? And come and share your experiences. Thank you. Free mic if you want it. It works.
Number 3.
Any of them. Just use any of them. Oh, thanks.
Perfect. No. Hello. There we go. So yes, thank you very much for having me. Very proud to be here. So grew up on the Kapiti Coast and moved to Vancouver in Canada about 16 years ago, and that's beautiful Vancouver there. And so what I wanted to do was sort of talk to you a little bit about EVs in British Columbia, the successes that we've had, the learnings that we've had, so that we can help accelerate those changes here in New Zealand as well. So, very similar population. BC is about, actually, who's been to Vancouver here? Show of hands. Anyone been to Whistler? Whistler's pretty common. A lot of New Zealanders there, actually, funnily enough. So very similar population, about 4.6. About 37% of our CO2 emissions actually come from transportation. This was interesting, and the minister mentioned this a much higher number today. We import about $5 billion worth of fuel into BC, which is a horrific number. The interesting fact, though, is that we have the lowest cost of electricity and the highest cost of petrol, or gas that we call it in North America. So there's a really big differential, which makes it a huge candidate for electric vehicles. And 98% of that electricity is generated using hydro. And I was talking to BC Hydro a couple of weeks ago, and we have the capacity in the dams to, I think it was 75% of the vehicles in BC today were to switch to electric. We have the capacity in our dams to support that today. So we're very, very ready to do that. Another interesting statistic, and I think Malcolm sort of touched on it, EVs don't go far enough. And so 95% of the daily driving, and it's very similar here in New Zealand as well, is about 80 kilometers, right, of your daily drives. And that is well within the existing electric vehicle ranges, because every day you can leave with a full tank because you can charge at home. So I think when a lot of people say to me, oh, but what if I want to drive to Taupo? And I'm like, okay, how often do you do that? Right? Or once every 6 months. I'm going, and I'll show you later, there's an enormous amount of money that you'll be saving. Rent a car and make it a Ferrari, go nuts. An electric Ferrari if you can. But, so I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So we do have quite a number of electric vehicles in BC. We have about, I think it's almost up to 4,000 now. And we have severe highest per capita. Ontario, which is further east, which is where Toronto is, they have more, but we have more per capita. And we actually have quite a lot of charging stations. We have about 730 actual charging stations. This was an interesting analysis that I'd done. I always imagined that New Zealand was quite small in terms of its size compared to Canada. Canada's huge, but it's not, actually. So I overlaid it, and it's about the same height as BC. The interesting fact, though, is that about 73% of the population in BC lives within a stone's throw distance of Vancouver. So, but in New Zealand, obviously, you have a large third of the population up in Auckland. You have Hamilton, we have Wellington, and Christchurch, and whatever. So it's spread out. So that does represent some additional considerations per se in terms of charging infrastructure, but not insurmountable, just different. So what's some of the action that the BC government have done? So we've invested about $31 million over the last 6 years into promoting and infrastructure and what have you. So the group that I do a lot of work with, so I volunteer with the government around public outreach. So we've invested about $200,000, these are all Canadian dollars actually, into that outreach program. And we do have a sticker price rebate. So when you go into a car manufacturer, you get $5,000 off the sticker price of that vehicle. And we have seen that to be quite influential. So the chart on the right-hand side shows the actual number of EVs and the growth. And we've seen a doubling. So the rebate was introduced, and then it got exhausted, which was great, but they didn't renew it for a period of time, and then they reintroduced it. And when they reintroduced it, the number of cars doubled again. And it's interesting because I think the way consumers react is they think about how much money is coming out of their pocket now, compared to sort of considering the longer term cost-saving benefits of other policies or other benefits. As I said, we have about 730 charging stations throughout the province. This is another interesting fact. So we have a car retirement program. We called it Scrap It. But that's, if you're displacing these old vehicles where people are getting electric vehicles, you need a way to retire those or displace them. So you can actually get another $3,200 for handing in your old vehicle and another $5,000 off an electric vehicle. So we introduced HOV, which we call HOV, which is high occupancy vehicle access. So that can save you a lot of time. And that's a great point that Malcolm made, right? Is it not, some of the commutes that some of the people in Vancouver are often 1-2 hours. It's kind of how long it takes you to get from Waikanae to Wellington these days. But that's huge, being able to get that time back by driving in the high occupancy vehicle lanes. And we enforce that using a decal, actually. So there's a little sticker that has to go on the back of your vehicle so that can be detected by police. And you get reduced tolls. I forgot to put that on the slide, actually. So we have a couple of toll bridges. And if you're riding in the HOV lane, you get a reduced toll. So if you're a coincidental advantage. For some period of time, we did have a rebate on home charging. Home charging is absolutely critical because it means that you can leave your house with your vehicle full every day. And so it reduces the dependency on public charging, but public charging is really good for visibility. It's probably not really required for inside city traveling. As I said, 95% of people can travel their daily commutes or daily driving without even touching a public charging station. But it's very, very handy for public visibility. Whenever I stop at a charging station, I get random people asking me questions and talking to me. And if I always charged at home and never touched a public charging station, that wouldn't happen. So it is very important. But it's very also important for intercity travel when you need to go those long distances. The other thing is looking at multifamily homes, or what we call condominiums or apartment blocks. So the BC government introduced a rebate where if you want to put a charging station into your apartment building where you have a parking space, you can get up to $4,500 to have that installed, which is quite significant. And I think we've exhausted that. That was incredibly popular. The government is looking to maybe extend that. The other thing we introduced was a bylaw that any new homes that are multi-homes, like apartment buildings, need to have 20% of the parking stalls enabled for electric vehicles. And then we just, I think it was about 2 months ago, introduced a new fund where we've opened up $600,000 for EV fleets in the private sector. And that's quite important. So I was talking to a gentleman here just a few moments ago that he mentioned that 70% of new vehicle sales are fleets here in New Zealand. So it's very, very important for, I think, that to be electric vehicles, because that increases the exposure of electric vehicles to the public. We also introduced a hybrid taxi bylaw. So in the city of Vancouver, if you wanted to be a taxi organization that picked people up from the airport, 50% of your taxis had to be hybrid. And that was fantastic. This happened in 2012, I believe. So it exposed a lot of people to, hybrid vehicles. And so there was lots of questions. The hybrids often had those little graphs on the dashboard of where the electricity was coming from, and that spawned lots of questions. So that was fantastic. I know when I came into Wellington Airport, there were lots of hybrids, so that's already happening. The other one that's interesting is the ZEV or ZEV. I can't remember how we say it here in New Zealand, but so that was really interesting. So the BC is part of that, so that is a zero emission vehicle alliance, global alliance. So the BC government will be phasing out the sale of new fossil fuel vehicles by 2050. Right, so you will not be able to buy a fossil fuel based combustion engine vehicle by 2050 in the province of BC. So we do have electric trolley buses in Vancouver, and we do have an electric SkyTrain that we have that is being extended throughout the city of Vancouver. It has about 117 million riderships a year. Now, this is fantastic in Wellington, with the electric trains have been here for a very long time. So it's fantastic to see. So from a charging infrastructure, I've put some sort of statistics up here. The things that I wanted to draw your attention to is, so we have about 700 level 2 charges. So in BC, that's going to charge your sort of Nissan Leaf from absolutely flat to full in about 3 hours. A lot of those are in what we call long stay facilities. So they're at shopping malls, they're at community centers, town halls, parkades. So they're very strategically placed. The government funded the vast majority of that. And they're all free. So free charging throughout all of those charging stations, and the parkings are in fantastic spots. Like, I can go to the mall on Christmas Eve, as you do, and be pretty much guaranteed a parking spot while everyone else is sort of beating each other up for parking. So that's fantastic. And then we have DC fast chargers. So basically what they do is they charge the vehicle a lot quicker. So I can actually charge my Nissan Leaf in about 30 minutes. So that becomes a lot more effective for long distance travel. And we did some analysis of where those charges should be to sort of be able to enable that intercity travel. And just reiterating some of those points, I think the charging infrastructure was slightly easier for us because I said 73% of the population resides in the sort of southern part of BC. But I think some of the same policies will apply as you look at putting infrastructure in across New Zealand. The other important piece, and Chelsea reiterated this as well, is raising awareness of what are electric vehicles and educating people. So we did some analysis. We hired a marketing firm. And what we found, reinforcing Chelsea's comments, is people buy vehicles emotionally. So you need to market it that way. It's interesting. So I work for Microsoft, and at one point, my Apple was the competition, right? And Apple would market their iPod of this sexy girl dancing in a silhouette with just some white headphones, whereas Microsoft would say, "Oh yes, this has got 78 gigabytes of this and a 14-inch screen and a this, that," and the rest is kind of history. But that's the same way you have to position electric vehicles, right? Yes, there are great statistics on torque and all that sort of goodness, but it comes down to the emotional aspect, how fun they are, how quick they are, that they're a smart choice to make, environmentally friendly, sort of doesn't resonate too much. People don't buy them. Some people do, but mainly that emotional aspect of driving. It is really important to target those community events. So there's 3 groups that we identified. So there is the environmentalist, there's the technologist, which is kind of my category, and then there's the cost conscious. So target those groups, right? So we have a grocery store in North America called Whole Foods, which is a high-end, organic, naturally grown grocery store, and more, it's targeted a high-end market. So what we did is we targeted events there. That actual blue Nissan Leaf is a Nissan Leaf that we had in Whole Foods for over 3 months, and over 3,000 people picked up information leaflets from there. We didn't hand them out; they did. But it was think about that when you target your events and talk to people around making sure that the events align with those demographics. Social media engagement is really important. A lot of decisions these days in buying products are done researched first on the internet, and a lot of people look to their opinions of their friends and family and experts on things like Facebook and Twitter and what have you. So it's important to engage socially in those channels as well. And probably the biggest thing was test drives. Because once you sit in an electric vehicle, and the lucky person that gets to ride in the Tesla today is going to experience this, there's no going back. There isn't. These things are so fast. I love sitting at the lights. There was like this V8 thing sitting at the lights, sort of gurgling away, and I put my Nissan Leaf, and this guy must have looked over going, seriously? And I gunned it, and that guy probably spent about $48 worth of fuel to try and catch up with me. So once you get people in test drives, it's you just don't go back. This is actually a little sticker at the bottom if you can see it, because one of the things I found was that people don't even know that they're electric vehicles. They see a Nissan Leaf drive by and they have no idea. So I sort of promoted to the BC government, we should really put some stickers on these vehicles. So the one that I put there was, ask me if I miss gas stations. So that's what's on mine. So I did some analysis, because one of the things that comes back to me a lot is electric vehicles are too expensive. And so in Canada, and what I've done is I've translated these into New Zealand prices, I can buy pretty much a fully loaded Nissan Leaf for 30 grand New Zealand. The running costs of that vehicle are about $330 New Zealand a year. About $40 a month? No, I was never good at math, was I? But over 10 years of operating that vehicle, you're going to save about 16 grand, right? The break-even point is about 3 years, because you can buy a VW Golf. Anyone? I should have put diesel there, shouldn't I? Not petrol. But you can buy it cheaper, sure, right? But your average maintenance is going to be about $2,600 a year. So in New Zealand, the story is a little bit challenging. I think some of the Nissan Leafs that were in place were about $70,000, and I couldn't wrap my head around that. I haven't got around all the numbers, but I'm thinking I might start a business. I might buy Nissan Leafs in New Zealand and just start shipping them. But I understand there's a lot more sort of complications around that. But I think that the magic number that I sort of came to is that if we can get electric vehicles in New Zealand down to that $40,000 price point, based on how much you pay for electricity, based on how much your current price is for petrol, you're going to get that same 3-year break-even point at about a $40,000 purchase price. So these are the electric vehicles that are available in BC today. And then these, I believe, are the electric vehicles that you can get your hands on in New Zealand. So choice is really important, right? And I know a comment was made earlier that more cars are coming, which is fantastic. So what are some of the things the BC government is doing going forward? So we're going to continue the public outreach, continue the education, continue to evaluate the charging infrastructure to see if we need more and where it needs to be. But as more longer range vehicles come to market, as we talked about before, the new Model 3 has a fantastic range. That charging infrastructure is going to be depended on less and less, or in a different way. Last conversation I had with the BC government was that the current rebate incentive is being evaluated. There's kind of a tipping point where they sort of see, I don't think we need to invest anymore. And we're still sort of discussing when that needs to be. The zero emission vehicle mandate that I talked about by 2050, and then they're also looking at increasing the carbon tax. And I think about this in the same way as sort of cigarettes, right? You want to disincent bad behavior and incent good behavior. And so I think that that's something they're doing to balance that out, is to increase the carbon tax to incent more people to sort of move to renewable transportation. So what are some of the things that I think, personally in my opinion, that New Zealand can do to accelerate some of that success? I think fleets are really important, and incenting fleets, so you raise the visibility, whether that's for government fleets or commercial. I think other incentives like import duties, bringing those cars into the country, because a lot of them are being imported from other countries. Raising public awareness is really important. So public outreach, high visibility charging stations is important. And those ones down there I've mentioned in previous slides, target prices and rebates and bylaws. I think every one of us has had a Model 3 in our slides, hey? So that was not by design. Yes, it was, of course it was. The Model 3 is a game changer, or this new era of electric vehicles that is on the brink of coming out. I think we're up to around 400,000 pre-orders. I don't even know of a product or a vehicle that has ever happened to before, right? Where you've had 400,000 people put down $1,000 on a product that hasn't even been made yet. That's the faith that they have. That's the conviction that they have, that they want to make a difference. It's absolutely amazing. 346 kilometers of range, and I think I'm 159 thousandths in line. I'm hoping you can help me maybe shave off a few zeros off that. But yeah, that'll be my next electric vehicle. So I really want to thank you for having me here today. It is quite an honor to represent BC, but also come back to my home country and do what I can to help. So my contact details are up there if you want to reach out, but I really appreciate the time. Thank you.